The movie begins with Tantri's dad struggling with a knife and finally stabbing himself on the leg. Young Tantri runs to make him stop, but he stabs himself on the shoulder again. He turns and recites some spells, takes the lantern hanging on the door, then an evil creature appears behind him whispering into his ears. He drops the lantern and got burned by fire. We are shown grown Tantri in a bus who suddenly wakes up and it appears she was dreaming. She stops by a student dormitory and feels a presence move past her twice and quickly walks into the dormitory. She sees photos of missing students on the notice board and goes to her room. As she opens the door of her room, she feels a hand touch her, then she turns to discover that it was the two girls she met at the entrance of the dormitory. They introduce themselves as Faye and Asta, welcome her and leaves. While trying to make herself comfortable, she picks up a photo but it strangely falls to the ground. She bends down to pick it and sees a scary being looking at her from the other side of the bed. During lunch at the Satrika canteen, Tantri tells Faye and Asta that she has been seeing strange things since she came to the dormitory. She asks them if something has happened in the dormitory before her arrival. They tell her of the incident regarding their friends Aram, whom got picked up by her dad and went missing, and Luki, who everyone believes killed himself because they saw a handwritten note in his locker but his body was not found. Reza joins them and Faye introduces him to Tantri. The next day, while having her shower, Tantri hears a sound and gets frightened. She looks out from the bathroom but didn't find anyone. Still frightened, she takes her towel and leaves the bathroom, and a strange figure follows her from behind. As she dresses her hair in front of the mirror with the radio player on, she hears a strange voice from the radio talking to her. She reaches for the radio player and tries to switch it to another station, but the strange voice continues. A door abruptly opens behind her. She walks in and the door suddenly shuts, frightening her. She tries to open the door but could not. After a bit of struggle, the door finally opens and she rushes out. She notices something outside the window. She goes to check and sees a strange girl with blood all over her face and she screams. Later that night, while crying, she takes up a photo of herself with her dad and gets a flashback of him giving her a necklace and telling her that her mother left it for her. She lies down to sleep and sees herself in a room with Luki. She sees Luki strangely picks up a chisel. As he struggles with it, he pierced it into his ear, and we are shown in a mirror a strange being whispering to him. Luki runs out of the room and goes close to a ditch. He slits his throat with the chisel and falls into the ditch. Tantri suddenly wakes up and notices blood on her hands. In the morning, she goes to the ditch and sees the decomposed body of Luki. Later in the day, Tantri meets up with Asta and Faye. Asta tells her she heard she was the one who found Luki's body, and she tells them she saw it in her dream. Asta asks her to find Aram since she was able to find Luki. On their way to the car, Mahesa stops Tantri and asks her how she knew the location of Luki's body. Reza challenges Mahesa for stopping Tantri and they got separated. Reza drives them to Aram's home. As they look around, Tantri feels something strange and goes to look through a window. A strange face suddenly shows up, frightening her, and she breaks the window with her hand, injuring herself. Asta and Reza helps her, binds the cut with a cloth to stop it from bleeding. Faye finds a way into the house and calls them. They look around and Tantri goes to a walkway and her body gets taken over by a strange force. She sees a strange being and follows it into a room. She sees a spell markings and bows severally in front of it and picks up a spell book in front of her. She opens it and as she mutters some spell words, Asta comes in and calls Faye and Reza. They find their name in the spell markings and realize they have been cursed. Faye and Reza argue for a while and Asta tells them they have to find solution to stop the spell. Tantri tells them the spell has nothing to do with her, but they persuade her to help them, telling her she is involved because she was the one who found the spell and Luki's body, and she finally agrees. They sit round the spell markings, cut their palms with a broken glass and the blood flows on the spell markings as they hold hands. Tantri says some words and they say it after her. The evil being appears in the spell markings and taunts them, saying some strange words. Tantri begs it to remove the curse but it refuses. After taunting them for a while, the evil creature disappears and they leave the building. Reza drops Asta at her home. Tantri, Faye and Reza talks about what happened at Aram's home. Tantri tells them that she wonders why the curse killed only Luki. After a bit of argument between Reza and Faye, Reza drives off. Asta enters the house and his uncle takes advantage of her. Reza drops off Tantri and Faye at the dormitory. As he reverses to leave, the evil creature appears and tries to strangle him. Faye and Tantri notices something strange. They rush to the car but the strange being disappears and Reza tells them he is fine and drives off. Tantri hears the strange voice as she goes to the bathroom later that night. She goes into a trance as she enters the bathroom. She finds herself in Asta's house and sees her uncle struggling as he's being strangled by the evil being and he dies. The next day, Tantri goes to find Asta and Faye. She sees the spell marking on the floor. She tries to take the spell book from them, telling Asta she knows what she did, but Faye refuses to give her the book. Faye tells Tantri that Asta's uncle has been taking advantage of her since she was a teenager and she has tried to kill herself several times. Asta tries to stop her from talking, but Faye tells Tantri that Asta had an abortion when she discovered she was pregnant, which angers Asta. Tantri tries to show Asta sympathy, but she tells her to leave. Tantri tells her if she leaves without the book she won't help them anymore, and Asta tells her she doesn't need her help anymore and she leaves the room. Tantri goes to her room. As she lies down, a strange being appears behind her and asks her to help her. The next day at the canteen, Mahesa sees Tantri sitting alone. He later sees her sitting outside and approaches her. He asks Tantri if she has stopped being friends with Reza, Asta and Faye after discovering their true nature. Mahesa tells Tantri that Aram's disappearance is entirely their fault. He tells Tantri that Luki and Reza made a bet on who would sleep with Aram. Luki did, and he took photos of her and sent it to Reza, who made the photo go public. That was why he broke up with Asta and stopped talking to them. Mahesa tells Tantri he feels guilty for not being able to help Aram and gives her the photo he took of her. He tells Tantri that Aram was always standing beside her as she looks at the photos. Mahesa also gives Tantri the photo she took of Aram and she was shocked to see her with the spellbook and tells Mahesa that it is a spellbook. Inside the canteen, Asta starts to choke and surprisingly brings out a piece of a broken glass from her throat. Faye tries to take her home but she refuses. She sees Tantri and Mahesa talking and gets jealous. They go to Tantri's room. Asta takes her hair, a pair of scissors and her photo. Faye tries to find out what she intends to do with it but she refuses to tell her and they gets into an argument. As they leave the room, Asta goes to her room and locks Faye out. She sits in front of the spell marking, places Tantri's photo in her hair and start making a spell. Faye calls out to Asta and tries to stop her. The door suddenly opens. She sees Asta standing in front of her with dark eyes. Asta lunges at her, pulls her hair and shuts the door. Faye runs out of the house. The evil being appears above her and she gets pulled up by the forces from the evil creature. The evil creature casts a spell on her and Faye pierces through her eyes, pulling it out as Reza watches her. At the dormitory, Mahesa tells Tantri he recalls Asta talking about the book Aram always carry about before something strange happens, and since then Asta has been looking for a way to get the book. As they talk, Tantri goes into a trance and finds herself in a room. She hears a woman screaming and goes to look. She finds her being taken advantage of by 5 men. The woman turns, looks at her and smiles, and Tantri gets frightened. She hears a sound. As she looks up, the whole place gets dark and she sees the strange woman writing on the spellbook with a nail. As she goes closer, the woman drops the book on the ground, pierces her hand with the nail and pours her blood on the spellbook, and it caught fire. A strange force pulls her up into the sky and she laid curses on the men who took advantage of her, and she also get burned by fire. Mahesa eventually wakes her up and Tantri tells him she saw the woman who owns the spellbook. Tantri tells him that her grandpa was among the men that took advantage of the woman and she cursed the descendants of the men to receive misfortune. Mahesa tells her it is possible that the spell stopped and got reactivated again when Aram was depressed and heard the whispers of the spell to take revenge on Luki. He tells Tantri that the apparition of Aram she sees is trying to ask her for help, and their task is to make sure Aram is found. As Asta sits in front of the spell markings, the evil creature appears behind her and whispers to her. She calls Tantri on the spell. Mahesa and Tantri go to Aram's house. He goes in to look around while Tantri waits for him. The evil creature appears behind her and tries to kill her but couldn't. From the scene, we can see that Tantri is being protected by the necklace around her neck. Mahesa comes out to meet Tantri and she tells Mahesa she feels the presence of the evil creature. The evil creature screams and the glasses in the house shatters. Mahesa tries to protect Tantri and the glass pierces him. He falls to the ground and becomes unconscious. Tantri tries to wake Mahesa. She hears Aram's voice ask for help and sees her apparition. Tantri follows her and walks into a room with light flickering. She opens the door and immediately goes into a trance. She sees Aram being dragged out of the spell markings in her room by her father. Tantri sees Aram's father chains her in a room. The evil creature takes Aram's father up from the ground and slams him on the roof and he dies. Tantri comes out of the trance in the room and sees Aram's dad corpse on the ceiling and sees Aram. She notices that Aram is still alive and tries to free her but sees Asta in the room holding Mahesa with a knife to his neck. Tantri tries to stop Asta from hurting Mahesa but she stabs him on the neck, killing him. Asta gets back to herself and cries as she sees Mahesa dead. She gets possessed again by the evil creature and struggles with the knife but eventually slit her own throat, killing herself. As Tantri cries, Aram gets possessed by the evil creature. She screams and breaks the chain around her hands and legs and she began to speak loudly in a strange voice. Tantri picks up the knife and stabs her. Tantri is shown in the dormitory as the TV report gives an update that those involved in Aram's sexual harassment has been arrested. She gets a flashback where her dad tells about the circumstances surrounding her birth and asks her if she remembers the prayer he taught her, and they say the prayer together. Tantri is seen with the spell book in the dormitory and she throws it into the fire. We are shown Faye in an isolated room screaming with blood coming out of her eyes. Reza is seen in a police cell hitting his head continuously on the cell protector and he dies. Tantri wakes up from her dream and sees the spell book with her. She turns and sees dead people sitting behind her in the bus.